Hello, everybody. My name is Paul Hopkins, and I'm the Director of Acquisitions here at CPI Capital. And in this video, I am going to explain how to use the back of the envelope underwriting model that we use here at CPI. I'm going to explain what information you need to gather in order to properly and professionally underwrite an apartment deal using the CPI Capital back of the envelope underwriting analysis. So before I get into that, I want to share a couple slides from a presentation that I recently gave at the Multifamily conference in Toronto. So what is underwriting? Underwriting is the process of making forward-looking projections to assess a property's future performance and viability. So a forward-looking projection is also known as a pro forma. So in a nutshell, underwriting is making educated guesses about future performance. So to properly underwrite a property, you must look at 3 points in time. Let's look at today, tomorrow, and terminus. This is also what we call the 3 T's. So rule number 1 of underwriting, garbage in gets garbage out. Meaning that if you are not doing your research and not collecting the most appropriate factual data, you're going to get garbage that's going into the model and you're going to get garbage outputs. So spend the time to collect the right information so that you can properly assess the potential of each of the properties by using factual information and the best information that you could possibly gather so that you get the best performance and the best outcome with your model. So as far as underwriting models, the larger the property is, the more complex things can get. This means that, there's properties that have, ground floor, mixed use, retail, or ground up development, or condominiums where you're buying additional units over time, that can get pretty complicated. So there are many different types of Excel-based underwriting models that are out there. You could search the web and find them all. But in this video, I'm explaining how to use the back of the envelope underwriting model within CPI. So underwriting models basically all do the same job, but in slightly different ways. This means that you're going to use the same data and inputting that into these different models, and you could get different results. The results might be slightly different. They shouldn't be too drastic, but it's all depends on how somebody put it together, the assumptions that they're made, some of the calculations that are used, but just keep in mind that underwriting is an art form and it's not an exact science. So, do you need any fancy model to do an underwriting? No, you don't. But it's definitely helpful in a pinch that you are going to be able to roughly underwrite a deal using a calculator, pen, and a paper. So what do I mean by that? We're going to do a quick analysis using what I call the back of the napkin. So here's an example of here we go. An example of a 136 unit apartment where the average rent is $1,350 a month and it has a 45% operating expense ratio. The market cap is 6%. And we want to know what is the value of this property. So doing some quick math, we're going to first figure out what the net operating income is of this property. And to do that, you take 136 units times the $1,350 per month per unit, multiply by 12 months to get your year income. And then you're going to multiply it by the operating expense ratio. So 100% minus the 45%. And you're going to end up with 1.2 million for your net operating income. Now to determine value is net operating income divided by the cap rate. So 1.2 million divided by 6% is going to come out to 20.1 million. So right there is a quick way to look at a deal to determine what the value is of that property. And is this something that, kind of fits within your criteria? And do you want to take the next step? Really, the next step is to do the back of the envelope underwriting. So I'm going to now switch it over to our underwriting model. So this is the back of the envelope underwriting model that we use here at CPI, and it has several different tabs down here at the bottom, and I'm going to quickly cover the tabs for you here, and then we're going to dive deep into each one of these tabs and how to build out your model. So on the first tab is the investment summary. So basically you have two sides, the left side and the right side. On the left side, it just breaks down what is the property, the executive highlights, and what is what's the deal all about, including the seller information, the acquisition assumptions, disposition or the sale assumptions, your value add details, project level returns, sources and uses of the cash, and then quick metrics. So again, like you can do the quick back of the envelope underwriting to basically determine its value based on its cap rate. And we have a cash flow snapshot here just to see how the cash flow is performing year over year. And then of course a photo. So these are all summaries that within the model, these are the outputs that are generated from the inputs that are done on the following tabs. On the right-hand side is your operating projections or your pro forma. The first column here represents basically your trailing performance, your T12 or your T3 or your T1 even. And then the next 5 years of pro forma performance. And the only reason I go up to 5 years in this is because, you could go up to 7, you could go up to 10, you could go up to 20 years. But within CPI, we typically look at a 5-year time horizon. And so this model is specifically built to look at the property within 5 years. And at the top, you have your renovation schedule, your income, your operating expenses, and then your net operating income. Below that, you have your net unlevered cash flow, meaning the cash flow that you're receiving prior to paying your debt, like your loan amount, and then your net levered cash flow. So this is after your debt payments. And then below that is the performance metrics, figuring out your cap rate on purchase or your break-even occupancy. And then a graph, a pie chart of the unit mix. So that's the investment summary page. And then we're going to look at the following tabs here. So the inputs tab is basically where you do most of your data entry. Everything that you see here in blue are fields that need to be data entered into these fields. So you'll enter in the property name, the full address, submarket, and so on, as far as the project information. You're going to enter in the seller information if you got it from either CoStar or from the broker. Your value add plan, usually you could pull this straight off of the broker offering memorandum. Listing out your income and expenses. Your sources and uses of cash, including your acquisition fee and other closing costs. Your debt assumptions. And then some metrics for just figuring out your loan size based on either the cap rate or the DSCR or your loan to value. On the right-hand side is your pro forma breakdown. So you've got a column here that represents your trailing performance, either your T1, T3, or your T12. And then you've got over here, for each year, you can list out your organic income growth assumptions, your economic assumptions, economic loss assumptions, your organic expense growth assumptions. And then down here, this will calculate out your net operating income, your net unlevered cash flow, and then finally your net levered cash flow. This next tab is for the rent roll. So in this tab, you're going to enter in the data that comes from the rent roll that's provided to you by the broker. This here is an example of a rent roll that we have for this specific property. And it lists out your floor plans, the square footage, the market rent, the actual lease rent, your lease expiration or lease start date, and then most times it does include additional income items, so like water fees, trash fees, pet control or pest control, pet income is what I meant, lease lock, etc. So we'll take this information and we'll enter it into our rent roll tab. Enter it into our rent roll tab here, and I'll show you a step-by-step on how to do that. The next tab here is your unit mix summary. So it takes all the information off of the rent roll tab and basically gives you a breakdown of all the floor types, the in-place rents, the market rents, and your pro forma renovated rents. The next tab is the T12 tab. So this is where you enter in information from the trailing 12 or the T1 or the T3. And to give you an idea, this is what a T12 looks like from a professional management company. So it shows the last 12 months of history plus the total over the last 12 months. And it breaks down the rental income, other income, operating expenses such as payroll, landscaping, utilities, maintenance, etc. All right. Jump back into the back of the envelope here. And this is a tip that I would suggest that you do for your market. And what this tab is it has the expense unit cost on average for properties located in the state of Florida. And we've broken it out based on what submarket the property is located in, or how many the unit count is, what the vintage is. And I've summarized that basically down here at the bottom. And what this is basically a guide. It's a guide that I use to use as a template for operating expenses if I don't have the operating expenses from a seller. So this is just a good guide to let me know, hey, am I in the right ballpark for what this property should be operating as? And then finally on the last tab here is basically a link to this video. So again, I'm going to dive into how to properly enter in this information and then some of the levers that you can pull. I'm going to pause this video at times so that I could enter in information and so that you don't actually see me entering the data, and that could get very boring very quick watching that video. But what I'm going to do is kind of show the breakdown of how I did it and the information that I enter in here. So let's dive in.